Hello, this is Ricky Baez, Director of People and Culture for Four Corner Resources, and you're listening to the Higher Calling Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for listening to episode 2 of season 2 of the Higher Calling Podcast. This is Pete Newsome, and I'm back with Ricky Baez again today. So, Ricky, how are things?
Everything is great, Pete. It is August 2nd already in 2021. Could you believe it?
It's going fast.
It's going faster than what I thought it would, considering everything happening in the world today. So, yeah, it's going fast. How have you been, sir?
I'm doing well. A week in Key West. Just got back from that with the family. So I'm tan. I'm happy and relaxed. So all is well in the world.
Awesome. Did you drive or did you fly to Key West?
We drove. Long drive. Yes.
Yeah. So what is it, like 6-7 hours, something like that?
From Orlando, it's somewhere in between, but it's not bad. It's a lot to look at as you get through the Keys, and it's an interesting drive if you've never made it before. Have you done that before?
I've been there by boat. I went there on a Carnival cruise ship a long time ago. And man, I got to tell you, Pete, maybe your experience is different than mine. I learned really fast that their definition of customer service, it's not the same as the definition of customer service in Orlando, Florida. I got to tell you that. It's
a little laid back, right?
A little,
and you but it's part of the deal. If you're in Key West, you have to know what you're signing up for. And we took a family-friendly trip with the kids, but there's definitely different ways to experience Key West, I think. And
there is.
So I look forward to going back again with my wife and seeing a different side of Key West, I think.
I wonder, Pete, if you do the same thing I do whenever I go on vacation. Whenever I go on vacation, look, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time clocking out. So whenever I go on vacation, I'm always looking at what businesses are doing, what organizations are doing, what are they doing to attract more people. Do you see if they are if they have the same workforce shortage that we're seeing here in Orlando?
Interestingly, I don't think they do.
Wow.
Where we see that with restaurants, frequently here that are understaffed, and so they can't seat all their tables because they don't have enough wait staff and maybe even back in the kitchen. But everything was packed there. We're Floridian, so anyone outside of Florida listening may cringe a little bit, but not a lot of concern for COVID, right, wrong, or indifferent. We know that's ramping back up. And so there's definitely reason to be cautious and careful, but I can say definitively that no one's too concerned in Key West right now, for better or worse.
Well, you know what? It's regardless where you live, whether it's Florida, Texas, California, New York, I'm sure people are getting a little bit worried with everything happening. And, I'm sure people as far as the workforce is getting worried as well, especially with these organizations that are bringing people still back into the office with everything happening. And it's an even bigger push for organizations, in my opinion. I don't know, you may disagree here, Pete, but in my opinion, it's an even bigger push to give employees the flexibility to work from home, right?
Ricky, I think that's quite the smooth segue into the topic of our podcast today.
I try, sir. I try.
Well done. So on that point, we are gonna to talk about that. You're right. Some companies are there, or at least they were getting there. With current conditions and the numbers spiking up, that may be changed or put on pause for a while. And other companies, ours being one of them, have decided that the benefits of working at home, even when health concerns aren't a factor, outweigh being in the office. And at Four Corner Resources, we've decided to give everyone the ability, almost all of our positions anyway, the ability to work at home for free, not for free,
I was gonna say
by choice, but to work at home indefinitely.
Yeah.
And most of our employees are taking advantage of that opportunity. And you can live anywhere. You can work from Key West. You can work from Orlando. You can work from the mountains out west if you choose. And that is going to be our going forward strategy. Some of our clients are doing that as well. Others, look, let's be real. Some positions have to be on site.
Yep.
Not all, and maybe not even most have that luxury, but it's becoming a competitive tool to use in the marketplace as well for companies who may want to leverage that as a perk, as a working for them. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts of that right now for sure.
Something interesting that you just said there that is becoming a perk. It's becoming actually not only a perk, I think it's becoming into a token, a something to negotiate with, right? This is something unheard of in the past 24 months. So it's for those employees that are out there looking for work right now, because you've got people across this country that are still hurting, they're still looking, whether it's due to their doing of something else. And Pete, the reason I say this, because we talked about this on the last show. In April, 4 million people decided to say I'm gone, solely because the organization they're currently working for are saying you have to come back into the office. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe this is self-inflicted that they don't have a job. Those 4 million people are 4 million people. So it's have you always worked from home, or was there a time where you was in the office all the time?
So at Four Corner, in the 16 years since starting the business, it was by default we were in the office, and that's very consistent with the culture in the staffing industry. It's very collaborative. There's a lot of things that you do in person that in the past really weren't possible to do online. It wasn't even a thought or consideration more often than not. And technology has evolved a lot in those 16 years. And so we were already moving in that direction, but we were offering it as a perk in the past. So if you achieve certain milestones, you could have days, remote days, and so our employees looked forward to that, and we're taking advantage of that. So we already had the technology in place. I don't think we've had phones on our desk for a couple of years now. We were using soft phones through laptops. Every employee had a laptop. So when COVID hit really hard last March, and we all decided to go home or needed to go home, it was very easy for us. We were already set up to do it. We didn't lose productivity. The
Awesome.
employees certainly
Awesome.
seemed to like it. And so it went from being a reward to just being our normal state of things. And, for a lot of reasons, we decided to make it permanent.
So when I worked back when COVID first started, actually even before COVID first started, Pete, I was working for an organization where half the time I was working from home, and I got to tell you, from my perspective, for me, it was harder than what I thought it was going to be. And the reason I say that because I'm an extrovert by nature, and I got to talk to people. I got to be in front of people. And I found myself either on the phone or talking to my dog, Honey Pie, one of the two. Right. But you know what really, really was I had a difficult time with? When to mentally shut down. When I worked from home, I had a difficult time mentally shut down. Let me tell you what that means. If I went into the office, I got into a car, drove for an hour, got into the office, say hello to my team, my business partners, logged in, got some coffee, and then I would work, do my job. When it's time to go home, I would close my laptop, get in my car. That was a physical indicator for me that I'm going home. So my mind shifted. And it wasn't until I started working from home, Pete, that I never have that physical indicator. So I will log in around 6:37 in the morning, because it's literally my home office is about 10 feet from my master bedroom. I would
Sure.
do what I got to do when I wake up, go over and just start working. And it didn't hit me until about 2 years ago, Pete. I'm in my home office. My son, back then he was 6 years old. He comes upstairs and he's like, "Daddy, mommy wants to know when you're gonna come down for dinner." And I'm like, "Please let her know. I'll be down in 15 minutes." And I happened to look at the clock. It was 9 p.m.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
9 p.m. And I'm like, "Oh my God, not only do I have to have dinner, he's got to be in bed." Right?
That's
So
right.
I got to give him a bath. So I went downstairs, did my thing. What that taught me is that if I'm at home, I'm in a completely different space in my mind than I'm at work. How do you know how to
It
get people to change that? How to change that mentality?
so everyone's different. Everyone's situation is different, and you're home with a family. I'm home with a wife and kids, and right now all four of mine are home with my older two who are in college, being home for the summer, and it creates challenges and opportunities. Right, the challenge is that separation. The challenge can sometimes be distractions. I have a new appreciation for how much activity takes place at my house during the day, and my office is right by the front door, so I see and hear all of it, and it can be a lot. But also, it does create those opportunities to see your family at times you otherwise wouldn't. It creates opportunity to not feel guilty when you have a lot of work to do, where you can check out for a few minutes. And so for me, I did work at home for a couple of years prior to Four Corner, and I developed what I thought was a pretty good habit, which I've now started again. Of I can I can check out for a little while. I can go outside, play basketball in the driveway. I can go watch, practice. I can go coach if I'm doing that during one of the kids' seasons. Eat dinner with the family, and then come back and still be in work mode. Where
Mm,
when I had that separation, as I did for most of the past 16 years of going from the office to home, I had trouble getting in work mode once I was home because that's not where I worked. And so there's pros and cons, I think,
yeah.
right? And so for, in a perfect world, everyone would do what we're doing, I think. It's perfect for us, which is we offer that option. So if there are days you want to go into the office, you can, but if you choose to work at home indefinitely, that's okay too. And so it's such an individual thing. I don't think it's a one size fits all, that's for sure.
So excellent point right there, Pete, because it's when I had clients and I was consulting, and when they would ask me, Ricky, what's the best way for us to approach this dilemma that we have, whether they should work from home or work from the office? And to be honest, what I told them, Pete, obviously these are organizations that they have the capabilities to work from home, but they thought it was one or the other. And I told them, you know what? Give them the option. If you give, because everybody's different, because for you it was different than it was for me, and I love the option that we have here at a Four Corner Resource, because we have an office in downtown Orlando, and our employees, they can either come to the office or work from home. It's entirely up to them, so they can kind of mold what their week looks like. And obviously they have to perform like any organization would, but it's we provide that unique ability for an employee to have that much more control over his or her day. As a matter of fact, Pete, I was messing around on the Four Corner Resources website. Did you know we have one of those? I'm sure you did. Yeah, we had a Four Corner Resources website, and I saw an article actually that was published today: tips for remote employees starting a new job, which is very topical right now here, especially right now with everything that's happening. People are getting a little bit antsy with what's going on across the nation with COVID. But it's I like some of these tips here, and the first one here that I want to throw at you is set up your space. And what it talks about is, don't just come off bed and just brush your teeth, do one wave of a comb through your hair, and then start working. What I like what this article said is to give you step by step on what you should do. You should create a replica of what you had at the office at home. That way you get in that space. Is that what you did?
It is what I did
All right.
ultimately. In the office that I'm in now was used for the previous 10 years as a video gaming room for my three boys. So once we decided that we weren't going to go back to the office, I booted them out and took it over as it was intended to be used. But not everyone has that space, and so that's a consideration too. And so I've noticed recently there's some new technologies coming out, some new industries even being born, who are catering towards employees who are going to work at home and but do have limited space. And so I think creativity is necessary. I've seen some interesting things on Zoom over the past year and a half. I've seen folks working in closets. I've seen them
Really?
working in bathrooms. And
Bathrooms?
so Bathrooms.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there was a guy that we interviewed, and I didn't call him out for this, but I'm quite certain he was sitting in a tub. And look, you do what you got to do. We
Yeah.
we know that. And um, but you do have to be conscious of your surroundings. You have to be conscious of how you're going to be perceived by others, and make sure that you can be productive and efficient in your workspace. So, that of course is a tip that everyone needs to take to heart. Set up your space. And what I think is kind of neat through this is everyone, you know, I hate to use the phrase "we're in it together," because our struggles are so individual and personal. It does become overused, but as it
Hmm.
relates to that consideration, yeah, we all get it, right? And like, no one asked for this, no one wanted this. Perhaps there's some good that will come out of it, like being able to work at home, but we all have to be accommodating and understanding of each other's situations. And so, the guy needs to work out of the bathtub. you know that's what he's got to do.
Or or maybe that makes him comfortable. I don't know. I
I don't
mean,
Maybe I didn't consider that aspect of it, but maybe.
could you imagine how that would go if you're like, hey, just one last question. How comfortable are you right now? Because from what I'm looking at, you look like you're 1,000% comfortable. And I'm wondering how you feel in that bathtub.
Well, to that point, right? Even if you have to work in the bathtub, you don't have to dress like you're working in the bathtub. Actually, I'm going to go so far as to say you better not dress like you're working in the bathtub. And so, what are your thoughts on that? So I'll ask you, you know, how you dress, that's changed a little bit. But what recommendations would you have for folks who may have a too casual attitude about
Ah,
how they're dressed in the morning?
there's it's and this is with anybody, Pete, right? It's what you wear makes you change how you feel. It changes the energy, it changes your mindset. If you put on a suit, a three-piece suit, and you look in the mirror and you're like, dang, I look really good, it changes your mood for the entire day. The same thing goes with working from home. And this works for me. If I worked, now I'm a creature of habit and I'm a creature of comfort. If I'm comfortable and I don't have anything distracting me, then I can be as creative as I can. As you know, I'm a little bit of an extrovert, and I'm a free spirited kind of a guy. So I got to be comfortable for those creative juices to flow. But at the same time, what makes me comfortable is to know that, okay, I'm not in my pajamas, I'm not in my workout shorts, I got what I would wear at work, because it puts me in that mindset. Now, I know everybody's different, right? So if you are somebody that you are really comfortable in comfortable clothing, you got to be careful, because even if you got that video on and working from home in Zoom, the kind of dress code for work still kind of applies when you're working from home, because we get to see you, right?
Right.
So what I would suggest is find something that's comfortable, but dress what you would wear at work, because at least for me, it definitely helps me stay focused, and it definitely helps me to keep that work mentality on, which again, an attire can really help you out with that. So that's what I would suggest.
And to that point, new employees, because that is the topic of the blog article that we published today. It's giving tips to new employees. Ask your supervisor, ask your manager what's appropriate in that
Yes.
environment, because it does differ greatly. And look, and that's an area where we've changed too. For years, we were business dress, and then we went to casual Fridays, that used to be such a common thing. And then we got to the point where we decided we could even be more relaxed in the office. And I enjoy it. I wore a tie every day for 10 years. And I'll tell you a quick funny story that it's always stayed with me. I worked for Tech Data Corporation in the 90s, and the at the end of every quarter, the CEO, or at the end of every quarter, the sales team, the inside sales team, which there were a few hundred, they were allowed to dress down. They could wear jeans, and back then that was a big deal, because we wore ties every day. And I remember the CEO making a comment once that he thought that's the opposite of what you should do. He thought everyone should show up at a tux on the last day of the quarter, because that's when you should be the most serious about
Yeah.
getting things done, not be in that relaxed state. And that's always stayed with me. just because I thought it was funny, but I enjoy being comfortable. I
Yeah.
never liked wearing a tie. I don't wear a tie today if I can avoid it. Um, and so I think I'm probably more productive when I'm comfortable, and I think most people are too. So I'm going to chalk that up as one of the perks of working at home.
Yeah.
And look, employees get to save money along the way too, right? On a lot of business clothes, shoes are expensive, and if you have to really just focus on what you're wearing from the waist up, then you could probably cut some corners there too.
Oh man, and gas. How much money you save in gas? I got a friend of mine who's in San Diego right now, and he sent me a picture of him filling up his rental car with. I don't know how he found one with the shortest of rental cars we have in the U.S.
Right?
today, and it was hovering at $6 a gallon.
Wow,
So
no kidding.
and San Diego, actually, was it? Yeah, in California. So it was hovering that high. So yeah, employees do get to save quite a bit of money, employers too, right? Because the less employees go into the office, the less resources you have to use from the office. But then again, it gets more expensive for me because let me tell you, Pete, my AC bill skyrocketed since I've been at
Okay.
home. Now I'm a guy who keeps it really cold, right? If my wife only was here, yeah, she'll keep it hot, but I keep it pretty cold. So it has gone up about 45% since I started working from home quite a bit. But you know what, Pete? For newer employees, it's good to start in a new organization and know what to do before your boss, before HR even steps in to say, "Hey, here's what you need. Here's what I'm talking about." Because when I used to work in an office, and I still come into the office today over at the downtown headquarters over at Four Corners. If I go in and plug in my laptop, everything that I have, and if I have an issue, I call my IT guy, and we all know who the IT guy is over at the office, right? We'll call the IT guy, aka Peter. We all know who he is. But if I'm at home, I may not have an IT guy to call on, right? Even before I start. So another tip that I saw on this blog post that I think is really really good for new employees to know when they're coming into the office, we're coming into a job when they work from home is once you get your laptop, once you get all your equipment, plug it. Don't wait for the first day for you to start work, for you to plug in your equipment and to see if it plays nice with whatever Wi-Fi router you have at home. You should really take the time the night before or even the business night before to really make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that's, accountability that needs to
Yeah.
be in place for any employee, but there are different considerations for sure. And that's one of them. And, you don't want to be a burden, on your employer if you don't have to.
Yeah.
And in a company like ours, our IT guy that is a part-time, we actually outsource our IT. Um, but with 30 employees, which is what we have internally right now, someone's going to get that call, and that happens to be Peter who wears a lot of hats for us, and that is one that many times now that we're home, the employees need to take their responsibility for themselves
Yeah.
and figure out how to fix things, show initiative, and so that's a great tip because if you're not used to doing that, a little preparation goes a long way for sure. So yeah, that's a good one. What else do you recommend?
Here's what I recommend, especially it's especially with working from home and people who haven't done that in the past. If you've come over to our organization from an organization that required you to come into the office, there are some things that we don't think about that we miss when we start working from home. So it's really good for you to take that extra step as that new employee to make sure that you touch on this, and that is gather intel on what you're supposed to do. What are your expectations? Because if I'm at the office and Pete and I work for you, which I do, I go to your office, hey man, how you doing? How was the weekend? Everything's great, blah blah blah. We'll have some coffee and we could talk about some of the clients that we've worked with in the past. But that's in passing, that's not scheduled time versus working from home, we don't have that interaction. We don't have that passing time. So the other piece that I really like is to gather intel on expectations and take the initiative to make connections.
Yep.
because as a boss, you've got a leader who's, like you said, they wear a lot of hats. So they have other things that they need to do. Not to say connecting with their employees is not important, especially in that first week is crucially important. But if that employee was to say, "Hey boss, if you got a quick 5 minutes, what exactly are you expecting of me in week one, week two, week three?" And Pete, this is something we did. We just recently did a training program to where we lay that out. So if you're a new employee coming into Four Corner Resources, you don't have to ask that, right? Because we have it laid out for you. But for if for any other organization that a new employee comes in, it's really good to initiate that connection with that leader and ask what exactly are the deliverables that are expected from you week to week to week. Would you not agree?
That so of course I would absolutely agree, and that's tried and true
Yeah.
advice, regardless of where you're working. So if you happen to be listening and you're in the office, as a new employee, do that anyway. Don't but it's heightened when you're remote because the conversations that would just flow naturally or happen naturally in the course of a day, in the office, you and I, would walk by each other 10 times a day, if not 50 times a day. And when you see someone, you acknowledge them, you talk to them, you get to know them in a different way, where now it has to be, I'll say forced. It sounds negative to put it that way, but that's exactly what it is. You have
Yeah.
to make a point of developing those relationships that would just naturally happen. And so, I want to separate those things a little bit. On the expectation front, yes, every employee early on should have asked for a very clear understanding of what's expected of them in their role, in order to perform at a high level, and then do your best to outperform whatever you were told. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just 101, advice. But it's not going to happen as naturally as it otherwise would if you're remote. So you do need to think about that, and then also make connections with your peers,
Yeah.
your coworkers. If your company has gatherings, make sure you attend them.
Yeah.
That's a key component too, and we're having to be conscious of that, right? That need to get together, especially for new employees who I may not interact with um, through the normal course of business day to day, because to do so means we have to schedule a Zoom, we have to schedule a
Yeah.
call. I don't get to see them just walking in the morning and being in the office like I used to. And so we have to make sure we're doing those
Yep.
things, right? And both from the organization standpoint, but as an employee, don't sit back and wait. And that's the advice that I would give. Find reasons to connect with people, find reasons to build rapport and develop relationships. It's really important. And yeah, something I've thought about a lot since we decided to allow everyone to work virtually, because again, most people are taking advantage of that, not
Yeah.
surprisingly. Um, I think it affects the young professionals more than older ones, because I already have a lot of relationships. You already have a lot of relationships in your industry, in your profession, right? In HR, for example, for you know lots of people in HR. You're very involved in the HR community. I've been out of school, working professionally for, well, a few years now, over 25 years. Crazy to say out loud. And so, I have a lot of contacts, but if you're just coming into the workforce, then you may not have that. And that can feel
Mm.
isolating and that can feel lonely. So, for young professionals, that is a concern that I have, not only for, our own team at Four Corner, because I want them to feel connected. I want them to
Yeah.
build rapport and relationships. I want to know them. It's crazy the thought of, we have probably 10 employees that work for us right now, our internal staff, who I've never met in person. And
Wow.
that's very strange feeling to me, because they're part of our family at Four Corners.
Yeah.
So we're planning a happy hour on Thursday night. So hopefully
That's
I'll
right.
get to see all of them then. But as the employee, make sure you take advantage of any and every opportunity to engage your peers and your coworkers.
You bring up a very good point that I honestly did not think about, and it's how this affects I mean, we're all experiencing what's happening in the world today, and we'll have to deal with it through our own specific lens. But I never thought about how that would affect a younger professional differently than a seasoned veteran who's been around for some time. Because you're right, that seasoned veteran already has those relationships built, whereas that young professional needs to start building that. It's harder for them, Pete. It just hit me right now. It really is harder for them. So that's more the reason why, on this blog post, when you're talking about those pointers on what you should do when you first started with an organization and you choose to work from home. One of them that I want to point out is to be a friendly face. Let me tell you what that means. What that means is, especially when you start with a brand new organization, let's forget COVID for a second. You start with a brand new organization. You walk into the new office, you see new employee orientation, you see a bunch of new faces, and it's a new thing. It's a new chapter in your work life. But if you're always on Zoom, you're always on team meetings, right? Um, it looks exactly how your last job looked like, right? So you may think it's the same thing. So what new employees should do when working in a company remotely, the very first thing you should do, make believe you're still in the interview. Put your best foot forward. Put a friendly smile on that face. Put a picture on there. I'm not saying you're going to be unprofessional. What I'm saying is, you know how sometimes people get comfortable at work? Like sometimes too comfortable, and you got to bring it back down a little bit. So before you start getting quote unquote comfortable, because you don't know the culture of the organization. So trying to feel out what that culture is, stay in that interview honeymoon phase as far as how you communicate until you figure out exactly how people talk. Do they use emojis? Do they not use emojis? Who you can use emojis with? Who you can't use emojis? Because the worst thing you want to do is to start off on the wrong foot, a relationship with somebody at work, and it starts off bad, right? I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it. And this blog post, it hits the nail right on the head when it comes to that, and how to err on the side of caution and be that friendly face online.
That's a great tip, and you have to when we look at our when I look at our clients, culture is such a huge consideration for uh, our recruiting process. We go way beyond having to just consider the skills, the background, the experience of a candidate, the things that you would see on their resume. That's a huge component of recruiting, but it's just a component of it. The equally large component, and sometimes even greater component, is considering the culture of the organization and who's going to be a good fit. There are companies where if you weren't willing to use emojis, you may not fit in very well, right? There are companies who would frown on the use of emojis in any situation, professionally. And so if you're using them, that's not gonna go very well. And that's sort of a silly example, but you extrapolate that into just the bigger picture of figure out what the tone is in that organization,
Yep.
figure out what their culture is, who's successful there, who you should be looking to, emulate, ask other people, right? I mean, when you're in doubt, ask. People like to give advice, people like to be helpful, but they're not going to necessarily do so, in an unsolicited fashion. So those are all part of the things that have to be conscious, and I want to say forced again, right? I need a better word than that, but they need to be practiced and acted upon when you're new to an organization, because how else are you going to feel that out, right? How are you going to know unless you ask? And so it's even talking through this, it's making me think even more about our training program, which we've had to shift and evolve a lot with our new normal in
Mm-hmm.
mind, and making sure we impart these things onto our employees. But that's one too, right? We need to make sure right from the start, we give them the guidance, to allow them to know who to ask
Yeah.
and where to find out these things, right? We can't cover everything. And I often say, if we ask, 100 questions, we're going to wish we'd asked 101, right? Because there's going to be something we didn't cover. And so when I apply that to our own training, I think, we're never going to cover every question that a person asks. We have to give them an outlet to do it. So if your company's not doing that, you know, ask your supervisor, ask your peers, ask those other people who appear friendly and open, and put and be willing to be vulnerable with that. Right. I mean, that's one thing that I think resonates universally well, which is people who are willing to not come in as a know-it-all and the expert.
Mm.
Don't, if you don't portray yourself that way, but instead you ask for help in a professional, friendly way, the help will come. It will be given, and openly, and without hesitancy, probably.
And you used a word that I use quite a bit, and I call it the V word that a lot of people have trouble with, Pete, and is being vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with that. You're a human being, folks. We're all human beings. I know there's some people in your life that maybe have done you wrong that you think otherwise about them, but in general, people are human beings. So they make mistakes and they may, just handle situations differently. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because I like what you said there as far as ask, bring up the question, ask the question, bring it up. But here's what I like about what we do here. We have a culture where it's not looked down upon when somebody asks a question, because we see that as an opportunity to see what the other person is thinking and to kind of calibrate to see if this is how we want to do things, not in a negative way, judgmental way, but in a way of you've got a skill set. And we got to make sure that you use that skill set to the best of your abilities so it can help you in your career. And obviously, it can help us here over at Four Corners. So we're going to create this culture of trust to where if you ask, no question is a dumb question. As a matter of
Right.
fact, I'll say this. The only dumb question out there is that question that people are afraid to ask. Just ask it, right? Just ask it that way. And I tell this to my students all the time, Pete. This training right here, this is where you should ask all the questions that you think you're going to get in trouble with.
Right.
Ask them right here. Ask them right now. Why? Because we could talk about what the outcome should be, what the outcome would be, and we can calibrate and we can, kind of learn from it. The time to ask, the time not to ask is when you're about to do it.
Right. Right.
Right. So I love that we do that here. And folks, for everybody listening out there, let me tell you, if you're talented, and I mean talented at recruiting people, if you're talented in matching people's interest to a fulfilling career, and if you're tired of coming into the office and you just want a little bit of flexibility in your life, we got it. We have an office in downtown Orlando, and we got the technology to really help you move the needle from A to B. And Pete, I'm not just saying that because I work here, because if I didn't believe it, I just won't mention it. But we do have that flexibility, and I believe, and I think you believe too, I believe this is going to be the future of work. When people start having conversations with potential employers talking about what their offer, what their total compensation package is going to look like, in about 10 years, I see this conversation of whether people can work from home or not is going to be as common as benefits is right now. Right?
Sure.
It's because right now people talk about benefits and when it comes time to their offer letter. But I'm telling you, this right here, what we're talking about right now, it's going to be just as common later on. And I'm just glad that you and I here at Four Corner Resources, we're at the forefront of that.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
And we're learning as we go, how to do things, and the only way you're gonna do that, or the best way to do that is to ask questions,
Yeah.
right? And there may not be dumb questions, but when you ask a question, make sure you write down the answer, right? And remember, and don't ask it again, because those are
Yep.
the dumb questions. I will say there are dumb questions, the ones
Yep.
who have to be asked more than once,
Over and over and over again.
right?
Right.
And so it's in many ways it's a scary time. It's an uncertain time.
Yeah.
That goes without saying, probably, but it's also an exciting time because it's a time of change and opportunity. And to your point, we're trying to do our best to take advantage of that,
Yep.
and learn and improve through these experiences. But there's no roadmap for it, right? We're learning as we go. So we're in the unique and I think really attractive position of being a staffing company that gets to see how so many other companies are doing it and having an insider view. And while it's not our place to give them advice necessarily, sometimes we do where it's appropriate, where we see some decisions that we'd be remiss if we didn't mention if there were things that we were thought were really poor decisions being made. We have great clients. That doesn't really happen with us, but we get to see what works and what doesn't. And so we try to leverage that wherever we can, and that's information we use internally. It's information we do share with our clients and prospects for everyone's benefit. So hopefully this helps some employees who are new to this take advantage of it. If you have questions on what we've talked about today, or you see topics that we haven't yet addressed that you'd like covered, or just clarification on anything, email us, please. Hire calling at fourcornerresources.com. We would love to get feedback on this. Podcast is a work in progress as well. And the more feedback we get, the better we can make it. And we really appreciate everyone listening today.
Roger that. And Pete, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Any other parting words you have before I close out and get ready for next week?
Just goodbye.
Goodbye. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it. So remember, for tips for remote employees starting a new job, go to 4Corner Resources, the number 4, cornerresources.com. You're going to find that blog and a bunch of other blogs out there that are really going to help. Look, we would love for you to come work for us. We would love for you to be a client of us. But what we want to do, we want to get this knowledge out there. So use it for whatever it's worth. But hey, like Pete said, let us know how we're doing on this podcast, because this podcast is also being tweaked as we go. And we'd like to hear what you have to say. With that said, folks, have a good one. Drive safe. Good night.
Thanks, Rick.